Bonjour à tous. Merci de nous
Hello
rejoindre
and
pour
welcome
l'entretien
to
de
the
France
France
24
24 interview. Our guest today from Brussels is the NATO Secretary General, Anders Fogh Rasmussen. Good day to you, sir.
Alors que, évidemment, le monde s'interroge
The
sur
whole
un
world is
possible
wondering
bain de
about the
sang
risk of
en
there being a
Libye.
bloodbath in Libya.
Vous nous direz votre sentiment.
You'll tell us what
Vous
your
nous donnerez
feeling
aussi
is,
l'analyse
and
de
you'll also
l'Alliance
tell us what is the
face
analysis
à la
of the
nouvelle
alliance
donne des
in the face
révolutions
of
arabes.
the Arab
Mais,
revolutions.
d'abord, première
But first of
question, à la
all,
fin de cette semaine,
at the end of this week, on Thursday and Friday, there'll be the first meeting of the NATO Ministers of Defence. What is the message that you'll be sending out on Libya?
The Ministers of Defence will discuss Libya. I must say I am worried by the situation in Libya. The regime's violence is unacceptable. We must be mindful of what is happening, but let me tell you that NATO does not intend to intervene in Libya.
Alors, effectivement, elle n'a pas l'intention
d'intervenir. So you say there's no intention to intervene. Much has been said about a no-fly zone, and Washington now says that this would be extremely complicated. Has NATO given up on this idea of there being a no-fly zone?
We have asked the NATO military to conduct some cautious planning and to get us ready for any occurrence. Having a no-fly zone and enforcing one would be a very complex and far-reaching operation. Any NATO operation will require a UN mandate to be implemented.
Why is it complex? Why is it so complicated?
Well, it would be a complex operation because the country is very large and we would have to use different sorts of military resources.
So after a good 2 weeks uprising, the leaders of the insurrection are very often soldiers, deserters, businessmen, lawyers. They have called on the United Nations to authorize airstrikes on the mercenaries of Gaddafi, who obviously are continuing the battle, and it would seem they're gaining ground. Do you think that targeted airstrikes would also be an option?
Let me say once again that any NATO operation will have to be based on a UN mandate. Obviously, we are keeping a close watch on what is happening.
You say it has to be based on a UN mandate. All of your 28 members are not in agreement as to the advisability of military intervention. For instance, the UK is very much in favour. France thinks that this would lead to a clash of civilizations. It would be even worse, and there would be very negative reactions on the part of the Arab world. Do you agree with that?
Well, the international community is really faced with a dilemma. On the one hand, we want to put an end to the bloodshed, and on the other, we have to be very mindful of the sensitivities across the region and the way people would react to an operation that could be felt as being an outside intervention. And that really is a dilemma.
So if there were to be an intervention, it could mean that the NATO zone of intervention would be extended even further because it's already present in a large part of the region. So that's something some people don't want. What do you think?
Well, once again, I cannot give you any insight to our planning, but let me say once again that any NATO operation will have to be based on a UN mandate.
Why is there this division among your members on the question of an operation or intervention?
NATO is not divided. NATO is an alliance of democratic governments. We obviously, therefore, have an open discussion on the topic, a very free debate, and we review possible options. This being said, we are united on the fact that we have asked our military to carry out some planning so that we can be ready whatever the circumstances. But a NATO intervention will have to be based on a UN mandate.
Do you think that it's going to be possible to crush the opposition? Do you think Gaddafi will be able to do that? Is that your fear? In other words, that there'll be bloodshed and it'll all come crumbling down if there are no longer any really viable opponents?
Well, it is a very serious situation. Let me say once again that it is the Libyan government's responsibility to protect their people.
In an exclusive interview with France 24, Muammar Gaddafi said that he was primarily fighting jihadists who'd been trained by Al-Qaeda, who were under the influence of drugs provided by Al-Qaeda. Do you think these are just far-fetched ideas on the part of a leader who's on the verge of a downfall? Or is there a risk of there being an Islamist presence in Libya?
No, I don't think that is a possibility. We are talking about a youth-led revolution that all fits into the Arab Spring movement. And I must say I am particularly optimistic about the future of the region as a whole. Freedom will bring about an increase in peace and prosperity and progress across the region.
Do you think then that here, when you're talking about there being a new strategic concept for NATO, that it means that in NATO you're going to have to rethink things again? What's going to be the long-term impact for the stability in the area of these Arab uprisings?
Well, it was a key element in our strategic thinking. We have decided to really strengthen our partnership with countries in that region, in Northern Africa and in the Middle East. These revolutions across the region clearly shows how important it is to do it that way. We will therefore strengthen our partnerships so as to support transition towards democracy.
Is this something that we should be happy about or worried about? For instance, from the point of view of a balance with Israel, if there were to be an upset in that balance?
We have a partnership with a number of countries in the region, including Israel. And this is, in fact, a forum in which there's dialogue between the Arab states and Israel.
Let's move on to something else. There's the Afghan issue, and recently 9 children were killed in an unfortunate incident that prompted anger on the part of the population. President Karzai on Sunday asked NATO to stop killing civilians, saying that the apologies on the part of the Commander-in-Chief Petraeus were not enough. What's your reaction?
Well, I very sorry to have seen civilian casualties. And I can tell you that we will do everything we can to avoid further civilian casualties. We have managed to reduce the number of civilian casualties, and in fact, the enemy is responsible for the greatest number of civilian casualties in these operations. 3/4 of these casualties are actually killed by the enemy.
Right bang in the middle of the economic crisis now, and this brings me to my last question. Do you think that the 28 members of NATO, that the populations are going to be willing to increase the defence budget, or are you not going to suffer from the economic crisis? Do you think there's a risk of there being a drop in the budget and thus a weakening of NATO?
The economic crisis is a real challenge for all of us and for defence budgets. We therefore have to make sure that we use our resources in a more effective way in defence issues and defence matters. And that is an issue that will be at the heart of the Minister of Defence's meeting on Thursday and Friday of this week.
Which we will obviously be following here on France 24. So thank you very much, and thank you all of you for watching. Stay with us for more.